The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is driving bold policy solutions for a resilient Canadian agri-food system and building a stronger future for Canadian agriculture. Visit capi-icpa.com to discover how.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 to Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Of course, also a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Well, today we're going to have some fun here. Pre-U.S., it's kind of like U.S. Thanksgiving Eve. Looking forward to today's show. Of course, just a reminder, we will have a show tomorrow and Friday as well. With some of the disruptions in the schedule, we're going to make it happen for you here. We got Ed Brochinski from Cargill to talk about the markets. I want to hone in on his overall perceptions of the overall market complex and talk about specifically about canola and soybeans as well. We got Lyndsey Smith here for a RealAg Issues Panel. That's really not a panel because it's just the two of us breaking down some of the biggest issues of the week. And then we've also got a Farm Safety Roundup. We're going to talk about some of the grain blitzes that are going on in Ontario. Jay Remsick with WSPS and Bruce Christianson of ESDC. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call or text the RealAg feedback line. How you do that is 855-776-6147. Also, I want to mention in the bonus segment today, we're going to have a market interview with Chuck Penner of Leftfield Commodity Research talking about what's going on in the pulse market. So if you are a pulse grower and you're interested in what's going on in peas and lentils, China tariffs, India tariffs, what's domestic demand, all those kinds of things, Chuck Penner will be in the bonus segment today on the program in the RealAg Radio podcast. Let's take a break. When we come back, we got Ed Brochinski of Cargill standing by. We're talking soybeans and canola right after this. Time for a product spotlight, joined right now by Dwayne Briand, North Central Alberta Territory Manager for Cantera.
CS 4100 has been tested in farmer trials across Western Canada in every territory, and right from the beginning it was fast out of the ground, lots of vigor, covers the ground with nice leaf, and then gets up there and gets to flower before the competitors. 4100 is a very high yielder and has done very well across all of our trials.
What do you have for those that are looking for true?
We have our brand new CS 3400. It definitely is something I've been waiting for in North Central Alberta because we have a very big clubroot issue. One thing that this variety brings is brand new clubroot resistance package to it. It brings that mid to early maturity, and it has a really nice high yield potential. It is its first year out there, so it's going to be a limited launch.
So if you're interested, book early. Somebody wants more information about Cantera seeds, where do they go and what do they do?
Go to your local retailer who sells Cantera seeds, or you can go online to cantera.com.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other RealAg personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture. In the midst of significant global and domestic upheaval, we have an opportunity to leverage agriculture and food as a strategic driver of economic growth and prosperity for Canadians. Join the agricultural industry in Calgary, December 2nd through the 4th, to explore how Canada can meet the moment and unleash the true potential of Canadian agriculture and food. Visit growcanadaconference.ca to register. I will be at the Grow Canada Conference myself. Looking forward to it. It's always one of the big highlights of the year when we look at some of the conferences and things that we can attend. Okay, let's talk markets. Joining us right now for this segment is Ed Brochinski, who is with Cargill. How are we doing today, Ed?
I'm doing good, Shaun.
Good. You can you believe we're at the end of November here?
No, not really. It's snuck up on us pretty quickly here. Yeah.
No kidding. Okay. There's lots happening in the markets. Let's start a little bit broader, 100,000 foot. Provide some perspective because one of the things that's really noisy and cloudy right now is there's just so many headlines like this, and this, and every day it's something that's kind of potentially moving or not moving the market. What's your thoughts on where we are here at the end of November?
Well, at Market Sense here, we've kind of coined this term called a foundational market. That's what it feels like we're in right now. And you hear about bull markets, you hear about bear markets, and a lot of people say, well, in between you've got a neutral market or a sideways market. And I think that the price action feels anything but neutral or sideways. And I would characterize it as a foundational market, which pivots around the cost of production. So you have periods of time where the market trades well below the cost of production for farmers for a number of reasons. I'll pick a headline that you could point to a reason why, but when it's below the cost of production, that generates demand. And we've seen, for example, in wheat, record demand, right? On the flip side, it sometimes goes above the cost of production where farmers are making a profit. You might point to canola in that scenario right now. And that brings supply back onto the market, right? And we're pivoting on either side of that cost of production. That builds a foundation of supply and demand that is not a trending market. It's not bullish, it's not bearish, but it's really part of the necessary cycle before we move on to the next stage of the market cycle.
How often do we have this stage of the cycle, what you would define as a foundational market? Is this something that comes every couple of years, like cattle, the cattle cycle 7 years? How about this?
I think that it's hard to say exactly how long it lasts or how often it comes along. I think the last time we were in a foundational market was really a long period of time between 2014 and 2020. So almost 6 years that the previous foundational market cycle lasted. We formed a really solid base of demand, and that allowed the bull market that occurred in the early 2020s to occur. So that's a long time. I'm not saying that this foundational cycle will last that long, but it can be a long time.
Can it be good for growers?
Well, I think it's good for growers in that it generates some market stability, or at least some understanding of what normal is. Again, there's definitely volatility within that cycle, but that stability attracts demand, attracts confidence in the price ranges, and that at the end of the day, what we all want is stability of income, right? That's kind of the goal.
Okay, so what if I'm holding inventory, I've got some 25 crop around me, I'm making my plannings for 26. If it is a foundational market, what does that mean for me in my business planning, my marketing plans?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that you understand your own cost of production. As a farmer, when I say that the market's trading on either side of the cost of production, I say that's the average. Now, every farmer is going to be different than the average. And so it's really important, especially if you're one of the higher cost of production, higher overhead farmers, that you're taking advantage of the times that the market's trading near the high end of the foundational range, because it tends to be with big crops and big demand that the high end of the range doesn't last long because those big crops get sold into the market. And it always feels like, from a headline perspective, that we're just on the cusp of a new bull and it's going to break out and it's going to go to the moon, right? It always feels like that. And then, of course, some other headline comes along and breaks it back down. So we've got to take advantage of it.
Canadian farmers right now, if you look at our October results of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, they're holding. They see market, this is a time to hold. The market will have some lift into the future. That's their anticipation. It was a 135 at a 200. Okay, so we're up considerably since July. Mm-hmm. Is there reason to be optimistic about the future direction of prices here, given what you're seeing in some of these fundamentals?
I think that the fundamentals are pretty heavy right now for a lot of the crops. So you're seeing record corn production in the United States. It might be a record canola crop here in Canada, really big wheat crop globally, a massive wheat crop. So the fundamentals are actually kind of heavy. And so I don't see a fundamental reason for the market to rally. There is, however, a sentiment reason, right? We're seeing the headlines from China, Donald Trump, pushing the trade deal. We're seeing biofuel sentiment, for instance, in the oilseed market really, attract a lot of attention, bullish attention. So there's sentiment reasons why the market could go higher, but fundamentally, it's a time to be taking risk off, in my opinion.
When I hear you say there's sentiment reasons, that doesn't lead me to like sustained rally. That there's opportunistic times or points or number of days, or maybe it's an afternoon in the market, but that doesn't sound very sustained. Is that a fair assumption by myself?
Very, very fair assumption. That is a defining characteristic of a foundational market, is that you get these opportunistic rallies that are really exciting, and those are the opportunities that we have to take advantage of, even though in the moment it's sometimes hard to believe that the price might start to back off.
I just want to leap back a second, because I have a section of my audience they heard you say, Ed, you need to know your cost of production. What I hear from the audience from some people very adamantly, the market doesn't care what my cost of production is. The market is the market. So know it, but it doesn't necessarily impact my marketing strategy, because I'm looking at the pricing action and the fundamentals of supply and demand, not my COP. Just so I want to circle back on that so you can explain what your point is.
So I disagree with that in part. I agree that on any given day, the market doesn't care about any single farmer's cost of production. But in the, say, medium run, the market does very much care about the average cost of production. And what you'll find is that markets do go down and find support at those average cost of production levels. We did see it in the wheat market this year. It went down to the average cost of production for wheat in Canada. It went a bit below it as harvest pressure came and dumped some, wheat went on sale, you could say. But it didn't go a lot below it. Farmers selling shut off in aggregate around those levels. So the market does respect average cost of production. As an individual farmer, though, nobody's paying attention to that number. And that's the only person paying attention to that is you as a farmer.
Yeah. Make some sense of oilseeds for me. Soybeans, nice little rally after the announcement of, what could potentially happen from a U.S. export perspective to China, 12 million metric tons before the end of the year. There's a lot of work to be done. I think they're like 9 million metric tons still short. And then there's 25 for the next 3 years, each year. But we haven't seen canola. Canola's kind of been more of a sideways trade, I guess. What's happening in the oilseeds here?
Well, right now the oilseed is very much, or especially soybeans, very much sentiment driven, right? There's a lot of this expectations that China's going to come in with the big buy side orders and drive futures higher, drive basis higher. We've seen a lot of that move already, in my opinion, because what the market might be not paying attention to or trying to ignore is that U.S. beans have now become fairly expensive on the global market, and there may be demand that's being lost, non-China demand being lost to cheaper suppliers such as Brazil now. So I think the question becomes is, if you're trading a Chinese bushel of beans of demand, but you're losing a European bushel of bean demand, are we really getting anywhere, or are we just spinning our tires in the overall aggregate demand? So I think the market's starting to get a little bit hesitant on the bean side. Canola is trading sideways because, one thing, there is a lot of optimism about the future of biofuels. And so that's supporting soybean oil, and that then comes in and supports canola. At the same time, really big crop in Canada this year.
Yep.
We'll see what StatsCan says on December 4th, but that supply is also hanging over the market.
Do you have any clarity or insight here? Of course, we talk a lot about the tariffs that China has on Canadian canola oil, seed, and meal. Are they still buying? Have any cargoes gone to China, or give us an update? Because a lot of times we talk about this as if nothing is going to China. I have a hard time believing that. What insight do you have?
Well, there is a couple of cargoes that traded into China earlier this season, right in the fall time. Those cargoes that show up on the shipping lineups, they go to a free trade port in, and I can't remember the name. It's Henan, I think.
Okay.
don't quote me on it, but there's a free trade port in China that is typically tariff free. It's kind of an experiment that the Chinese have been running for several years. The condition on that plant can buy Canadian canola only on the condition that it sells the oil and the meal outside of China. The oil and the meal is not allowed into China. So there's a very limited amount of demand, but it does show up on the shipping lineups as a China sale. I think the market's, a little bit encouraged by that. But so far we haven't heard any kind of meaningful demand out of China. They've just been completely quiet there.
Okay, so what's the substitute? They either just don't need any, or because I've even heard that Australia hasn't exactly been a rocket ship to the moon in terms of how much they've been pulling out of there. It's been a little bit slow as well. So, do they need canola? Have they just been using South American beans from that perspective, or what's going on here?
That's been a big surprise. One of the things that we thought would happen was that China would come in, buy Aussie seed. Aussie seed would get much more expensive as a result, and we would basically sell all our canola to everybody that the Aussies used to sell it to. That hasn't exactly happened. The Aussies are actually cheaper than Canadian canola right now. Why is that? Well, when you look at aggregate Chinese oilseed imports, they are up year over year, and most of it's up in beans. They've also been buying palm oil. They've been buying other oilseeds. The other side of the equation is Chinese oil demand, vegetable oil demand has been relatively weak. They are now the third largest exporter of soybean oil to India. And so it's clear that the Chinese veg oil demand is not as strong as it once was. And that might be part of the reason they just don't need as much oil seeds, or rather oil heavy seeds like canola this year from anybody.
Yeah, well, which affords them the ability to implement the tariff plan that they are, because if you don't need it, you don't care what the tariff is.
Yeah, that's right. It allows them to have optionality and pick and choose when and who they buy from and at what price.
Yeah. Before we wrap up here, Ed, one of the real demand stories has been U.S. corn exports. Is that something that can be sustained here through the winter months?
I think that if soybeans aren't being exported, then you can sustain the corn export pace. If you do have a resurgence in the U.S. soybean export program, where China's coming in buying 12 million tons and you've got good demand from elsewhere as well, then it's going to compete with corn capacity, and it'll be hard to sustain the just absolutely phenomenal pace that we've seen. I think it's up over 70% year over year. And that really is just a function of not having to compete with beans for space.
It's been torrid. There was somebody had a story out with this very concern that, for corn to stay on this pace, and if China's going to buy the 25 million metric tons in the 26 year, it's gonna be hard to do both. Like there's like a capacity issue there at some point. Hey, Ed, really do appreciate you joining us here. If somebody wants more information on Cargill Market Sense, how do they find you?
Well, you can definitely find information about Cargill Market Sense on the Cargill website. The best thing to do, though, if you want to get connected with a Market Sense advisor, is just to phone your local Cargill location. The advisor might pick up the phone there, but definitely somebody will be able to put you in touch with somebody who can help you make a marketing decision if you need to make one today.
And Lord knows in this market, we do all need help, all of us. Okay, Ed, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shaun.
That is Ed Brochinski with Cargill. Okay, we'll be back with more on RealAg Radio. We got Lyndsey Smith standing by right after this.
Ready to take your oat game to the next level? Try CDC Endure from Alliance Seed. CDC Endure oats are consistently one of the top yielding varieties in the Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta provincial yield trials. With strong standability, excellent disease resistance, and excellent end-use quality, CDC Endure might be the variety for you and your farm. Available from authorized Alliance Seed retailers. For more information, visit allianceseed.com.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues Panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And welcome back to RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues Panel here on this Wednesday. The Issues Panel is not an issues panel. Well, we're going to talk about issues.
Kind of
you just got to wonder if it's really a panel with only two. It's a panel of two people. At a conference, we would call this the ever forgettable. This is the fireside chat.
I was going to say it's more like between two ferns.
Oh, joined by Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture, based out of Ottawa, Ontario, who is this week in Winnipeg.
That's right.
Back, in Manitoba. Do you find moving back to your home, the province you grew up in, is it as friendly as people claim?
It is.
It is. Yes.
That's what's ridiculous, is that I'm proud of all the Manitobans that live up to the license plate of friendly Manitoba. Yes, it is.
And Minnesota has a similar state tagline too, I believe.
Do they? Okay.
Just think about the nicest people you know. They're from Manitoba or Minnesota.
I think it's something about the cold.
Is it the M though? It could be a combination.
Oh, is that what we're going with? I don't know. They're stuck in the middle. They're in the middle.
Well, then you got to think people from Maine and Maryland and
people
Montana.
from Maine.
Oh, Montana people are nice.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe it is the M. Anyway.
Could be. Okay, so thanks for joining me here today, Lyndsey. U.S. Thanksgiving week is chaotic in trying to, from a scheduling perspective. So we're wheeling and dealing around here. Yesterday, it was interesting. I got some really good feedback, I thought, on the interview with Deputy Secretary Vaden. I know you listened to it. What was your reaction? What are your thoughts?
So, yeah, I did. I listened to it twice, actually, which is often a thing that I do, probably because I listen to most of our interviews sped up and then I miss things and I have to listen to them again. So maybe that defeats the purpose. Anyway, so two things. And the communicator in me is like, wow. So much energy and passion and really knows the file, which I was really impressed with and seemed, certainly very forthcoming, on the points that he wanted to talk about, which is great. At the same time, so just as an observation, I also very much these are our messaging points and this is what we're going to get to. But I really appreciated where, the two of you really discussed sort of on the ad hoc payouts and those sorts of things, how complicated it becomes when you have to look at, all the focus might be on soybeans or soybean trade or those sorts of things, but there's all these other crops and crop types that have other dynamics going on that potentially have been hit harder in some ways, right? And so I think in that way it was relatable very much to, what we sometimes see in the Canadian system where, the noisiest piece as far as how much news gets covered or how much things get covered isn't always necessarily the sector that's hurting the most necessarily.
Great point.
Right?
Yeah.
So that I found very interesting and I think really important that when you're interviewing someone in that position, that they are, recognizing the complexity of the file that they're on and the value of some of these different pieces that all have to fit together. Because sometimes we forget about these things.
Well, okay, let's apply. I think you make a great point. Apply that to the Canadian context of canola. Canola is the phrase I use. It takes up all the oxygen in the room when we talk about this issue related to the Chinese tariffs. But peas, I think, are in a worse scenario in some ways because they're getting hammered by Indian tariffs. They got tariffs from China, and it's a real challenge. So, I think that's a great example. Peas are the Canadian equivalent to U.S. sorghum or cotton, not getting the attention,
cotton or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, I think on the grain side we have some of those that are disproportionate. On the livestock side, we have ones that are disproportionate, and I mean, I recognize that obviously in the case of canola, we've got 21 million acres. We've got a lot of farmers that grow canola. We totally understand where, and not to say that it's not an incredibly important market, but the pulse market, also represented by a lot of growers, but far fewer, highly concentrated in Saskatchewan, but value-wise also incredibly important. And exactly that, it's facing, tariffs in two major markets. And so it really does sort of speak to, sometimes we tend to focus on one over the other, and really we need to think of a little bit bigger picture on some of these moving pieces.
Yesterday, we also played the interview you had with Michael Harvey from last Friday that you did, fresh off CAFTA, and 11 of the 12 members went down to D.C. to meet with really the Republican side of the aisle when it came to members of Congress. I guess one of the signals, or I guess one of the pieces I got out of that is, at least they were getting meetings. You go back to last spring, like March, fresh after, shortly after the inauguration. I'm not even sure CAFTA is getting those meetings with some of those members of Congress. Canada persona non grata. They were going down and they were meeting with Democrats, which kind of, nice photo op, but really kind of pointless. What was your takeaway from some of the things that Mr. Harvey had to say?
Yeah, so similar in that, definitely, and he conveyed that sort of the feeling, the vibe, the just the reception that they got when they would ask those sorts of things, very different from, say, a spring meeting or that late winter sort of check-in that they did. So, they felt they were much more successful in securing not just meetings, but meetings with people of influence or people. And he did say that, it did seem that they were more upfront with, being open to hearing how an integrated North American market could help their constituents in whatever, state they may be in, on the affordability side, on the, cost side, on the, you want to run a business, you want to be profitable. Here is where an integrated system works well. And so I think that the timing also was really well timed in that, we did just see the USMCA, the comments from the over 120 groups that had weighed in on where the USMCA is working well and where they maybe want to see some improvements. But overall, it was quite positive of saying this is a deal that is working for Americans. So, let's keep it. Let's not, throw it out the window for sure or make any major changes. So I think well timed. At the same time, I think we also have to recognize that yes, Canada is important to the U.S., but we're only one player in a whole bunch of things going on, right? So, obviously we need to be there. It's great to see our groups go down there. It's great to get a good reception. But obviously the U.S. is more important to us as far as, our visual sort of where we rank things in the Canadian industry versus how U.S. feels about us. Yeah. Depending on which state you're from, we're maybe not very important or the most important.
Yeah, I think any group that's going to DC right now, you better be talking about affordability and how you help with the affordability issue. It is the number one concern for Americans here heading into the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. It will be heading into Christmas. It's the same thing in Canada. You look at some of the data from Abacus data, cost of living and the rising, the fact it's rising is the number one concern. And that's a flip from what we saw during the Canadian election that, got Carney elected. It was the number one concern there was Trump. He's now 4 or 5, depending on the month, according to Abacus. So, if you need to be talking about what people are concerned about, and affordability right now is definitely it. It was interesting, though. I had asked some different DC contacts what they thought about Canada having these meetings and, meeting with members. And I was being kind of positive. I got some pushback saying, basically waste of time, members, lawmakers are friendly to Canada. The White House isn't. Mm-hmm. And all effort needs to be on Carney sitting down in the Oval Office with President Trump to sort out and mend the trade fences and stop spending time with members of Congress. I guess maybe that's a little bit of a harsher reaction. I did hear it from a couple people, though. So there is something, something to that.
Yeah. And I think that, in reality, it speaks to just how sort of lopsided the power shift is, right? In that exactly that the Trump presidency and the White House is, very top down, and if Trump decides one thing, that's sort of that's how it's going to be, right? So it does make sense. And to that end, that was very much what Carney has faced over the past few days, is all these questions of when he will speak to the president next, when they will get together. It looks like it's sort of should be soon. But Prime Minister Carney did take flack for, he was getting a lot of questions about this and made that flippant, who cares comment. Did not land well. Let's put it that way. It seems to me he gets impatient at times.
Yes. He's still answering some of those questions as if he's a CEO.
Yes.
An executive, and not the Prime Minister. It was similar on the pipeline with Danielle Smith. You go back a couple months ago where people were asking pipeline. He's like, I'm bored with this topic. Also, kind of, same sort of like response, didn't land very well. People were like, well, especially in Alberta, we're like, what do you mean you don't? He's like, talk to Danielle. Yeah. Like, she's working on it. Which I kind of think that's the clip that, if you play in full context, you understand where he's coming from. But if you just clip I'm bored with this, then that doesn't land very well.
Who cares? Yeah, exactly. Now that is where we did see some movement this week, though, and we are anticipating tomorrow, Thursday, some announcement by the federal government where Canada and the Alberta government will be working very closely together on putting, as I understand it, and we'll see what the announcement is, but on essentially putting the pieces together. And you can see this, the cynic in me is very much, they are kind of doing the work to say they've done the work. It in no way guarantees the pipeline gets done. But politically, it plays well for both of them. So this is the cynic in me. We'll see where it goes.
Well, it's U.S. Thanksgiving tomorrow, so is it a pipeline for turkeys? Gravy. It's a gravy pipeline.
Oh, it's a gravy pipeline. I love that idea. Also, Shaun, you'll be very proud to know, in speaking with some Manitobans yesterday, they have decided to double dip.
Oh.
Yes. And I was like, absolutely.
Why wouldn't you?
Canada should adopt this. The double dip. We have double doubles. Let's have a double dip. Let's just do it. Yeah.
Oh, Tim Horton should be running with that.
Right?
Okay. That is fantastic.
Call me Tim's.
I never thought of that before.
Call me.
We are definitely doing full
good for you.
Double dip. So it's Thanksgiving. As my allegiances to Thanksgiving are very well known.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Doesn't matter. An October Thanksgiving, a November Thanksgiving, it's all good.
What other holiday do we get a chance to celebrate it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and gratitude is excellent. So give thanks all the time. See.
Exactly. When they tell you about journaling and what's the very first thing that they talk about? What are you grateful for? So that's why Thanksgiving fits right into that.
I know.
Oh man, we're really uncovering a lot here. We're gonna take a break. Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, both of Real Agriculture. We're back here on RealAg Radio right after this. Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
I'm Lyndsey Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to RealAgriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode.
Christmas is fast approaching. Liz, you got your Christmas list ready?
Yes, sort of. I've at least started things. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's good. Here's what should be on all farmers' wish list. Instant savings on corn and soybeans from DeKalb. Instantly save $25 per bag on corn and $1 per unit on soybeans, but only until December 12th. Okay, December 12th, important date there. Okay. Visit decalbrewards.ca for details. So there you go. Put that on your Christmas list.
Okay, on it.
Get
Check
it.
Mark.
Okay, interesting story, but kind of ag adjacent, right? Because farmers produce chicken. And one of the best places to put chicken is in soup. Did you know that? Do you like chicken soup?
I love chicken soup.
Yeah.
Yeah, chicken stew, chicken soup, chicken goes everywhere.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, you're right. I love it really, especially when you're a little bit under the weather. Mm-hmm. You really, yeah, exactly. So one of the most famous brands of soup is Campbell's.
That's right.
An interesting story here that they've had to put an executive on leave. Okay.
Because they don't like soup?
Well, they do like soup, but he made some comments about who the product is for. Oh. So what happened here is that Campbell's has placed an executive on temporary leave after he was allegedly caught on tape saying the company made highly processed food for poor people. There's probably multiple layers here of things that he is in trouble for. One, you work, you're, and I think he's actually the vice president of information technology. So, yeah. But if you work for a food manufacturer and you start to really diss, I guess, the contents and then who may or may not be consuming the product, it's kind of a weird way to approach this from a messaging perspective.
It is. It's quite surprising to me that somebody at that level would think that this was an appropriate thing to say, I guess. And also, I will tell you that I think any soup in a can is fantastic and an excellent lunch, especially with a grilled cheese. So if that makes me a poor person, I don't care. So there you go.
The company had to remind all of us, okay?
Yes.
Campbell's soup. So the company spokesperson said, Campbell's soups are made with real chicken, period.
Okay. Well, which you probably shouldn't have to remind people of that. I would say if Campbell Soup is taking suggestions, I would love to actually have more chicken in their chicken noodle soup because sometimes you are looking for it. So maybe they need a bit more. Anyway, this is a lesson in what not to say about a product you represent. Very much so. So I don't blame Campbell Soup for putting them on leave.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not ideal.
It's also like I want to eat what I want.
So, but this is, I would guess this may have something to do with, and of course we're seeing this in the U.S. with the, Make America Healthy Again. Yep. Yeah, whatever. There is this focus on highly processed foods, being evil, bad, whatever. But I don't know that you can necessarily, this is where something like a phrase like highly processed food can get really misleading, because just because something is preserved in a can doesn't instantly make it somehow bad for you. Yep. In that food preservation and the different ways that we do it, whether it's freezing, canning, whatever that may be, is actually revolutionary to be able to either transport or store or whatever. And it's not inherently bad, but I think that this probably is fallout from sort of this bigger attention on some of these things. And again, it sort of does speak to how important it is to actually understand some of these things versus making sweeping claims.
Well, and here's the other part about this. Like, I think that in general, people, and everybody is a different piece of the spectrum in terms of like not eating healthy versus like eating very, very healthy. And we can all aspire to probably improve. Okay. Like,
probably, sure.
And there's, and there's obviously there's a utopian objective here that I will never meet. I know that. But so it's a good initiative, but at the same time, one of the biggest thing we were talking in the last segment about affordability. Mm-hmm. The reality is to eat really healthy. The further you get down that healthy pendulum, okay, to that end, yep, the more expensive it is when you go to the grocery store. There's just no question about it. And so mm-hmm, it's really hard to tell Canadians or tell Americans like, hey, you know what? Mm-hmm. Affordability is a big issue, but also, by the way, we're trying to get rid of all the highly processed foods in the middle of the grocery store.
Yeah. That might be the way that you keep your family fed for a week. Right?
Right.
Like
Yes.
these are the realities of things of like, and I don't think we need to be shaming people into, that already are struggling to put food on the table to then be like, but you also, shouldn't be choosing soup. Well, no, actually, soup is just fine. Again, with a grilled cheese. Perfect.
One of the most controversial things I've said on this show in the last 12 months is the day we were talking about like Prem and Spam and those kinds of things. I did not mention a Canadian brand. Click. Yes. Oh, yeah. I got it fired up.
You got what for? Good. As you should.
All over me.
Yeah. I will say, and now we go down a rabbit hole, but I would say one of the things that the advent of like short form video, like TikToks, Instagram, Reels, Shorts, whatever, I have a new appreciation for things like Click and Spam in making fried rice. I didn't realize that was like a thing of like the protein in fried rice. And I've tried it and it is actually delicious and super salty. Don't get me wrong. But like, again, it's a sometimes food. You're not going to eat it every day, but it is an excellent use of Click or Spam. So there you go. Everybody go make fried rice.
And, one of the greatest sports is baseball. And
yes,
so, you want to make go all in on attacking processed foods. That means you're going after the hot dog.
You absolutely are. And
that seems like
that is.
You
is there anything more American than a hot dog at a baseball game? There is not.
Exactly. This is my yes, right.
Yes.
Now, are you? What's the condiments that you're going with? We're going to the Blue Jays game.
Yep, as we do.
What are you getting on that?
You're getting the footlong. Always mustard.
Yes.
Always mustard. Lots of onions, and I don't love cheese on it, but I will sometimes put relish for a sweet treat.
And some banana peppers, maybe?
Yes, I would do banana peppers.
Park the onions.
Oh, no, I love them. Just don't sit next to me, that's all. Go sit down the other end.
One story about Campbell soup, and look where this conversation...
Look where this goes. And we're 8 minutes in.
Absolutely. I do want to mention to everybody that we are not doing a RealAg Issues panel on Friday, but we do have a one-on-one exclusive with John Stackhouse, Senior Vice President to the Office of the CEO at the RBC Royal Bank. And John and I talk about a lot of issues I think our Friday audience is really going to be interested in to hear in terms of what is Canada doing right, what is Canada doing wrong from a 100,000-foot sort of perspective, and what needs to happen. How do we close the gap? And he's got some pretty harsh criticisms, but also some solutions as well. So encourage everybody to check that out on Friday's episode. Okay, Lyndsey, thanks so much for joining me here today. There's been a lot of fun, and have fun with your double dip.
Yeah, you as well.
I shall, absolutely. We'll be back on RealAg Radio. We're going to talk about Grain Blitzes. What is that? Well, we'll get to it when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Remsick Seeds and Lalamon Plant Care.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Shaun Haney here with Real Agriculture, and it's time for another episode of the Farm Safety Roundup. Today we're going to talk about grain blitzes with ESDC and WSPS. You know, if you're a grain producer, is your operation federally or provincially regulated? It's a distinction actually that really kind of matters. The Occupational Health and Safety Branch in Employment and Social Development Canada regularly conducts workplace inspection blitzes. And if you work in grain production, you know how essential it is to keep workers safe, especially around grain handling equipment, silos, and storage. In this episode today, we're going to unpack what blitzes mean for grain farmers. We'll explore what inspectors are looking for, why inspections are happening, and how health and safety partners like WSPS can help you prepare, stay compliant, and prevent incidents on your farm. Let's welcome Jay Remsick, who is Health and Safety Consultant with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. Also, Bruce Christianson, Ontario Regional Director and Regional Operations and Compliance Directorate of the Labor Program at ESDC. First, Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
And Bruce, good to have you on the show.
Thanks, Shaun. Happy to be here.
Okay, so it's important grain farmers understand whether their operation is federally or provincially regulated. Let's start there. Bruce, how do I know?
Yes, well, most farm operations in Canada, including the actual growing of grain, are regulated provincially, so under each province's health and safety legislation. But where the labor program gets involved is in very specific grain-related operations that fall under federal jurisdiction. So specifically, these would be grain elevators, feed and seed mills, feed warehouses, and grain seed cleaning plants. So this means that for employees working in these specific parts of the grain sector, their workplace and employment conditions are governed by federal laws, so specifically the Canada Labor Code, rather than provincial laws.
Okay, so federal grain blitzes can raise a lot of questions for producers. What role does an organization like WSPS play in this type of initiative, Jay?
So in this type of initiative, we are strictly prevention. Okay, so we're not going to be involved in the actual inspections.
Okay,
but we have numerous consultants, right, that are familiar with both the Occupational Health and Safety Act in Ontario and then the Canadian Labor Code, which will be federally regulated. So we could assist these operations in regards to what particular regulations pertain to their business, and also, right, to ensure that the employer is taking every precaution reasonable for the protection of their workers. And that can be conducted through on-site visits to those particular farms or operations to determine, is it federal or is it provincial?
Now, Bruce, I guess, why are these blitzes important and why are they significant and walk us through here what an actual inspection would look like, because when I hear inspection I'm like, oh, it's kind of to catch me in that aha, or there's obviously an opportunity for preventive and corrective actions and things like that, but what does the inspection look like?
Okay. Well, let's start why these blitzes are important. Well, they're important because grain handling is one of the highest risk activities in the federal jurisdiction. In fact, in 2023, this industry had the highest fatal injury frequency rate, so with 2 fatal injuries recorded that year. So common hazards in the industry include confined spaces, getting caught in moving parts, dust and explosions, engulfment and suffocation hazards, as well as falls from heights. So the proactive inspections our labor program health and safety officers conduct include a physical walkthrough with the workplace parties and a review of relevant health and safety documentation to determine if there are any health and safety issues, and an opportunity to educate the parties on if there's anything that needs to be corrected.
Now, Jay, if anybody's ever been through an inspection or an audit before, you know that where you really help yourself is being proactive. It's the pre-work. It's the being prepared. So, what steps can WSPS take to help grain producers prepare for an inspection, and what resources does WSPS provide to help operations build a strong safety program?
Yeah, and that's where we really step in regards to the being preventative, because we do have numerous resources, checklists on our website, on the agricultural landing page within WSPS We can assist these operations in regards to hazard assessments. Bruce just mentioned confined space. We have specialists that are specifically trained and deal with confined space hazards. Templates. Don't have a policy, right? We have those templates that we can provide to the operation. As well, we're not just going to provide the resources and let them do it on their own. If they need further assistance, we can help them in regards to that, and then keep them up to date with ongoing initiatives or blitzes and new resources that we have.
So Bruce, what additional information or resources does the labor program have to help our RealAg listeners ensure their workplaces are as safe as possible?
Yeah. Well, in addition to what Jay just mentioned, ahead of our blitzes, we'll be sending educational information to the federally regulated grain workplaces. So this will include key inspection themes of the blitz, relevant industry hazard information, and practical steps to prepare for NOSH inspection. We'll also be sharing hazard alerts that we've developed with information sheets relevant to the grain handling industry.
Okay. And of course, grain handling is really fundamental to farm life, but also one of the most dangerous parts of agriculture, for sure, as you earlier described. Grain tragedies, they're quick. They obviously happen very fast, but they don't have to happen really at all. And prevention's a big part of this. Bruce, tell us about the first blitz of 2026 on this matter.
Okay. Yeah, that's really important. So a blitz will take place in January or February of 2026 in Ontario. So during this blitz, our officers will assess compliance with key areas. So specifically, we'll be looking at machine guarding. So ensuring that proper guarding and lockout procedures are in place. We'll be looking at conveyor safety. So again, is guarding, emergency stops and lockout protocols in place. And finally, confined spaces. So are these spaces identified with proper signage? Are there risk assessments done ahead of time? And entry emergency procedures in place? And are employees trained on all of these for confined spaces? After the blitz, the labor program will be sharing a summary of its results and insights. So we aim to have this by the spring of 2026, and it will highlight where the sector is doing well and where safety improvements are still needed. And finally, I guess for listeners outside of Ontario, it's important to note that the labor program regularly conducts proactive inspections in the grain industry across Canada. So the information shared today applies to all of them. So please use the information you got from today and to take the necessary steps to keep your workers safe.
And Bruce, again, these blitzes we're talking about, this is for only the Ontario market, correct?
The one that we have planned for now, but as I've mentioned, we have activities in the grain industry across Canada on a regular basis because the grain industry is one of our priority sectors for the labor program.
Okay, great stuff. Well, hey, Bruce, thanks so much for joining us here today in the Farm Safety Roundup.
Thank you.
And Jay, it's great to chat with you again. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Shaun. Appreciate it.
Hey, great stuff. So if you want to strengthen your safety program in your grain handling operation, you can access some additional practical tools at the website of WSPS.ca/farm safety. It was great having that conversation with Jay and Bruce. And of course, again, that website is WSPS.ca/farm safety. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call or text the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll, of course, chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody. Shaun Haney here with Real Agriculture. Let's talk markets and bring in Chuck Penner of Leftfield Commodity Research out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. How are we doing today, Chuck?
Good to be with you, Shaun.
It's good to chat with you as well. Okay, so Chuck, recent conversations lately, I've kind of come to the conclusion that canola's taken up a lot of the oxygen. You watch the mainstream news, we hear about tariffs, and it's always in reference to canola. Now, canola's an important crop. There's like 20 million acres of it. But there's also pulses. And peas specifically kind of feel like a bit of they're getting the double barrel right now. We got Indian tariffs, we got Chinese tariffs. What is going on right now in the overall pulse market? Because I'm hearing a lot of concern from growers in terms of what this looks like, not only in the 25 crop, but looking ahead to how much pulse should I actually plant in 26?
Yeah. It's kind of a bit of a situation. I had actually expected it to be even worse. When this news started rolling out,
Okay.
I expected the reaction to be even worse. The fact that, pulse prices were coming down. We knew they were coming down because we were expecting big crops and not just in Canada, but elsewhere too. So pulse prices were already coming down in the summer. And then there's a post-harvest price recovery. And that's not been happening, but they haven't dropped further. That was my fear, is that, they could move contra seasonally and move lower. But even yellow pea bids, green pea bids, even maples, although it's a little harder to find a bid on greens and on maple peas. But yeah, these tariffs are certainly putting, headwinds in the face of these crops. And, maybe even though prices are steady, you could contrast that to say, well, what if those tariffs hadn't been in place?
Right.
Then we would be seeing more strength, right? If China and India were both buying yellow peas, we would be seeing stronger prices. We still have huge supplies in Canada, no question, but we would be seeing some stronger prices. So it's more the what if. Here's the possibility of what it could be, and we're still kind of here in reality at these lower prices. But it's certainly not the case. Looking at Chinese trade data, Indian trade data, well, they're going more toward Russian peas. The Indian tariffs are on everybody, but it's certainly putting a bit of a tough face on it. The one thing that is happening, though, for peas and for lentils, I would say, is that it's the classic market response. You drop prices and you raise demand. So even though we're not shipping much to China, and we'll start dropping off to India, we have been moving some decent volumes of yellow peas and red lentils, and from what I'm hearing, green lentils as well too. Some pretty good volumes already, close to average levels in and around that. So, I think what's happening is we're picking up more business from some of these other countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, some of those types of countries that normally wouldn't be buying, or they haven't been buying when prices in the last few years were high. Now they're returning to the market. So it's helping cushion that. But again, it's like, what if? What if you had China and India buying full tilt? Where could prices be? So that's where we're kind of at right now.
Well, and with both China and India, a part of what allows them to apply the tariff is they might not need as much inventory as they would if the tariffs weren't there, right? So it affords them the ability to do so. Is that seems to be the way it is in canola? Is that the case when we look at pulses?
Well, China is one, like India applied tariffs across the board to everybody. But we're seeing already that their planting of the pulse crops this winter, which are peas and lentils and chickpeas, the acreage looks like it's down. So, they might need to reconsider that at some point. But it's all in response to prices. So when India applied tariffs, their domestic price rose, and that's why our price didn't drop as far. So it kind of, offset that to some degree. In the case of China, it's different because they can import Russian peas. Russia grew well over 5 million tons this year. So, they don't have a problem displacing that. But I would say about China and maybe India, they can leave these tariffs on for quite a while, but at some point they're going to come off. It's whether it's this year or next year, at some point they're going to come off, and then there will be a strong market reaction. I don't think you want to bet your marketing strategy on, China in April is going to, drop the tariffs or things like that. I'm not saying they won't, not saying they will, but that's a bit of a risky thing. But at some point they will. That's the nature of it. But they can leave them on for extended periods.
You think back 5 years, Chuck, we were hearing so much about, the potential demand increase for pulse crops related to plant protein and, the demand for protein and the role that plant protein would play in the overall protein complex. We sure do not hear or see headlines about that right now. It is really quiet down, my friend.
Well, even when the buzz was the greatest about all of that, if you kind of scaled, or if you kind of like did some of the math behind that, it still wasn't going to offset China or India like completely. It wasn't going to replace that kind of demand. It was still relatively minor, and of course now that it's faded. But I would say is, you don't have the Beyond Meats and the Impossible Burgers and the those kind of things anymore. But the demand for pulse proteins in other products is still quite strong, actually. Okay. So, but no, it was never going to be 1 million tons of demand or that it's, and so it's just kind of so yeah, it's never believe the market buzz, put it that way.
Yeah. So something else and I'm going to take an issue in other crops and see if it also applies in pulses with peas and lentils. Right now with canola, soybeans, and corn, there's trade issues for both Canada and the U.S. And so we're hearing we need to have some domestic demand nation building projects to try to deal with some of the supply. So the biofuels, really, whether it's ethanol for corn or it's renewable diesel when it comes to canola and soybeans, depending which country you're in. Is there an equivalent when it comes to pulse crops, or is it, listen, like this is going to be an export reliant market?
Yeah. Nothing to this scale. I mean, the type of scale that you see or we are seeing or have seen in the canola expansions and all of that kind of stuff, the canola crush, not to that extent, certainly. If there are lots of small projects, and I guess you can start adding those up, and you could come up to some tonnage, but no, we're still going to be reliant on the whole situation. I mean, we have been in some ways we have been really lucky in the past because in 2017, late 2017, that's when India first put tariffs on peas. And so the Indian demand dropped, but that's just when Chinese demand was taking off. And then, when Chinese demand started to fade a little bit and Russia started entering that market, well, that's about when India dropped their tariffs to zero. But now we got both of these things happening. And again, they're not going to last forever. But it's like, how long can we wait? These countries have a tendency of, putting these tariffs in place for like 2-3 years at a time. Yeah. So I'm not expecting a quick resolution. But it would be great. I mean, our, at least, and I don't mean to speak well of the current administration in Canada, but like they're making the right noises anyway with respect to both India and with China. Now, I don't expect a deal with India to cause their pea tariffs to drop, because again, they're global, like they're applying them to all countries. But there is a little more friendliness anyway, less antagonism, put it that way, between these countries. And so that's a real slow grind of a process, but so sort of hopefully we'll see some signals that way, and or some resolutions that way at some point.
Canadian farmers have really led the charge when it comes to the growth of the pulse industry. Farmers in the northern tier of the United States look across the border and say, we have the same conditions, why not here? But do you see a big potential for growth of pulse acres in the northern part of the United States?
It's a different market down there. In large part, a lot of the pulses there move as a result of food aid, tenders and things like that. So it's less of a free market, if you want to call it, or a free flowing market anyway. So there's some stability there. But I see, and they do export some just through regular channels as well too. But a good chunk of it is this tender business, a food aid business. And, who knows what the current administration, I mean, there've already been slowdowns in that or cuts to that. And so it's affected it to some degree. So it'll partly be driven by, whatever the winds from Washington are. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wonder about that because, with all the attention on China, of course, that's very Midwest driven when it comes to soybeans. Don't expect peas to be like number one on the agenda, but that, if the acre got big enough and the lobby voice got loud enough, Canada could definitely have some competition long term when it comes to that market.
Yeah, certainly so. But there would need to be a change in their market structure to do that. And nothing to say that, the companies down in the U.S. couldn't do that. It's just they haven't to date. But yeah, I think it could too. You're right.
When we look at 26 in front of us, do you see a bit of a turnaround here in terms of how farmers feel about the pulse market? Because anecdotally, I feel like a heavy cloud, like a weight in terms of how people are looking at this market right now.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there are people who keep pulses in their rotations just for
regardless.
Crop.
Yeah,
regardless. But yeah, you'll probably it'll be one of those dips. We've had them before. I mean, this is a serious headwind, but it'll be one of those dips in acreage, and probably rightfully so. That's how the market adjusts, right? It's when you have low prices cure low prices. Well, how? By, like I said before, increasing demand and also reducing production. So it's kind of a necessary step that we need to go through to get the market recovering, quicker. So it would probably be a good thing for the market if farmers did back away to some degree from pulses in 26.
Yeah, a lot of mainstream radio interviews will ask me, are farmers going to plant canola next year? And yes, they are. They are. Probably a greater probability there's a greater reduction in the pulse acre than there would be on the canola acre. But I don't know. We'll see how that pencils out when we get a little bit closer to springtime. Aphanomyces, I should say. Aphanomyces is probably a bigger threat to the pulse acre than some of the marketing things that are happening.
Yeah. Well, it certainly put a ceiling on it. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting dynamics. Hey, before we go, you've got some workshops coming up that Leftfield Commodity Research is putting on. You're looking at seasonality.
Yeah, we're doing a couple of them. We're doing one in, end of next week. It's in Elm Creek, Manitoba. That's my old stomping grounds.
Nice.
Yeah. So we're going back there. We're going to the golf course and we're going to put on this workshop. And then we're going to do one in January 16th in Saskatoon, which is the day after the crop production show. So if people are in town for that, then they can just stay for that. But yeah, it's probably different than, I don't know if it's ever been done before or to this extent anyway. So we've taken all of our price history and all of that kind of stuff and done all kinds of calculations and to see how seasonality is, but also how consistent it is. How can you actually shape your marketing plan around seasonality? And so looking at, how do prices respond after harvest? When is the high? And it's different for each of the crops has its own particular high. A bunch of them are in spring. Some of them are in November. Those types of things. And then, can you shape your marketing strategy? And we've done this little thing with creating a sample farm and just looking at, if you spread your sales out evenly throughout the year, which I know nobody does, or if you price them only in the month of that this normal seasonal high happens, how would that work out? And we've done it over the last 9 or 10 years. And for a farm of about 5,000 acres or so, it averages $100,000 a year higher, just by selling in that month.
Wow.
Now, again, I don't, people can say, well, I can pick the market better than that. Well, fine. But there is something real, to that. And some of the years, there's a couple of years where it didn't work out. But all of the other years it did. So we've taken all of this stuff and we want to use history as a guide to the future. Because markets are cyclical and they do that, right? They move regularly. So anyway, so that's the plan. We got these sessions on December 5th and January 16th. And it's going to be very interactive. It's going to I'm going to be wanting to get feedback from people, and how do you market, when do you market, all of that kind of stuff. What are the triggers? What are the signals that tell you when you pull a trigger on a sale? Like what is that, right? And so I want to learn all of that from the group, and then also maybe help them a little bit too.
If somebody's interested in registering, how do they do so?
Go to leftfieldcr.com. On the notes page, there's more details, the cost and the logistics, and a bit of an outline of the day and stuff like that. And then they can just respond with an email that's on that information sheet.
Great stuff. Hey, Chuck, thanks so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shaun. Okay. Talk to you later.